Picture the most beautiful building on earth. 700 rooms with gold pressed into the ceilings. A hall walled in mirrors. 240 feet of it. Built to make candlelight multiply until night looks like noon. Gardens where the fountains alone drank a river dry. Now fill that building with people who believe a full bath is a medical risk. Shave their heads to stubble. Cover the stubble with other people's hair, bought by the ounce from peasant girls who needed the money more than the braid. Glue that hair into shape with boiled animal fat. Pork, mostly, whatever the label claims. Dust the whole arrangement every single morning with finely milled wheat. Wheat, flour, on heads, by the pound, in a country where bread is the difference between a quiet year and a burning one. Then set lice loose underneath. Yes, underneath, we'll get there. And hand everyone a long ivory stick so they can scratch without ruining the shape. That's Versailles in 1774, the most refined place in the world and one of the strangest smelling. A place where a man could be quietly ruined by a badly curled wig at the morning levee and quietly restored by a well-powdered one before supper. A place that gleamed white from 100 yards away and moved if you looked closely enough from 2 feet. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists drifting down the hall of mirrors with our mouths open. We're going in through the service door into the town below the palace, into the workshops that kept the whole glittering machine white. 1 year, 1 pair of hands, everything they would have seen, smelled, boiled, carried, combed, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I've given up trying to work out whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who like drifting off to the smell of rendered pork fat and the click of a lice comb against ivory. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. One honest thing before we begin, because this channel runs on it. The workshop you're about to stand in is real. The trade is real. The prices are real. The flour is real. And so is what the flour cost the people who never got to eat it. Every date you'll hear tonight happened on the day I say it happened. But the eyes I'm lending you are borrowed, stitched together from hundreds of wigmakers' apprentices who really did this work, in this town, in these exact years, and whose names nobody bothered to write down. Where a detail is solid, I'll give it to you straight. Where it's only what the age claimed about itself, a workshop legend, a rumour the century told at its own expense, I'll tell you so. Every time. That's the deal. Here we go. The fat is talking. That's the first thing. Before light, before anything else. A low, wet muttering from the copper pot hanging over the workshop fire, like an old man arguing with his supper. When rendered fat is almost ready, it stops spitting and starts murmuring, and you have learned to hear the difference in your sleep, because the difference is worth money, and the money is not yours. You lean over the pot and stir. The wooden paddle drags through the melt with a slow, greasy resistance, heavier at the bottom where the scraps haven't given up yet. Heat climbs your wrist. Your face, hanging above the surface, collects a fine, warm film that you'll wear for the rest of the day. You've been awake since 4:30. The fire was your first job, the fat your second, and the sky outside the workshop's one small window is still the colour of a dead coal. Then the smell finds you properly, the way it does every morning once you're warm enough to notice it. It comes in layers. Melted pork fat first, round and heavy and almost like cooking, almost like food, close enough to food that your empty stomach clenches and then, a half-second later, turns. Under that, yesterday's burnt hair, a thin, bitter thread that never leaves the walls because curling irons overheat, and hair scorches, and the smell of scorched hair outlives everything except stone. Under that, orange flower water and lavender oil, sweet and expensive, sitting on the grease the way paint sits on rot. And under it all, the base note of the whole century, unwashed wool, tallow smoke, the sour reek of the gutter running down the middle of the street outside, and you, your own shirt 4 days worn, your own skin. You stopped being able to smell yourself somewhere in your first month, which is a mercy, because nobody in this trade smells of anything good. You spend your days making other men gleam. Nobody gleams less than the boy who does it. Welcome to the town of Versailles, March 1774. You're standing in the back workshop of a wigmaker's shop on the rue.Fine, a 10-minute walk downhill from the palace of the King of France. On the shelf that runs the length of the room, wooden heads wait in a row like an audience of the beheaded. Wig blocks, each one carved and padded to the measurements of a particular skull, each one chalked with a name on its neck, because a wig built on the wrong block fits like an insult. The nearest one wears a half-finished tie wig the colour of ash, its curls still pinned in paper, and the name on its neck belongs to a man who owes this shop 371 livres, and has never once looked you in the eye. Your name is Nicholas Aubrey. You're 16 years old, and you were born in a village called Gallardon, out on the Beauce, the great flat wheat plain southwest of Paris, a country so level and so planted that in July it looks like a golden sea with a church steeple for a sail. Your father works land he doesn't own. Your mother raised 6 of you on bread, soup made mostly of bread, and the memory of bread. 18 months ago your father put on his good coat, walked you the day's distance to Versailles, and paid Maître de la Tour, wigmaker of the rue.Fine, 250 livres to take you as an apprentice for 6 years. 250 livres. Say it slowly. That's most of a year's wages for a working man. He borrowed part of it against a harvest that hadn't happened yet. He signed the contract with a cross because he cannot write, and the notary wrote his name for him underneath. And then your father shook your hand like a stranger, because that's what fathers did, and walked home alone. 6 years. You cook the fat, you sweep the floor, you carry the boxes, you pump the bellows, you learn the trade. In exchange you get a bed, 2 meals, 1 suit of clothes a year, and this is the part your father repeated all the way here, like a prayer, a future. Because a master wigmaker with a royal town clientele is a man of substance, and even a journeyman perruquier eats every day. Back home, that was the whole ambition. That was the entire horizon. Behind you, in the dark under the eaves where the ceiling slopes too low to stand, the bed you share with the other apprentice is still occupied. Etienne, 19, from Rouen, nearly 5 years into his 6, snoring with the total commitment of a man who came in over the workshop wall well after midnight. You share a bed, and yeah, that's normal. Every apprentice in every trade in France shares a bed. Privacy is a luxury that lives up the hill with the king. At least Etienne doesn't steal the blanket. He steals other things. You don't know that yet, not this morning, but you will. But never the blanket. You give the fat a last stir and swing the pot arm off the flame to let it settle. The scraps have gone down to brown husks. The melt above them is clearing, gold and quivering. Later you'll strain it through linen, wash it, whip it with essence until it turns pale and smooth and stops being what it is. That's the whole trade if you're honest, and this trade is never honest. You take fat and make it perfume. You take a poor girl's hair and make it a chevalier's dignity. You take flour and make it frost. Maître de la Tour has a saying, and by now you could recite it in your sleep, and some nights you probably do. Nothing at Versailles is allowed to look like what it is. The stairs creak. Speak of the man. Maître Antoine de la Tour comes down into the workshop the way he does everything, without hurry and without waste. A square-built man of 54 with a butcher's shoulders and a surgeon's hands. His own head, and this is the joke of the whole profession, is shaved to a grey stubble and covered at this hour with nothing but a plain linen cap. The wigmaker doesn't wear his own goods at home. Nobody sees him, so nobody matters. His face is heavy and pouched with the years, but the hands, when they pick up hair, go light as a pickpocket's. He can pass a lock of hair between finger and thumb, once eyes shut, and tell you the province it grew in and roughly what fool overpaid for it. He looks at the fire. He looks at the pot. He looks at you. You let it murmur too long. You didn't. The fat is perfect, and you both know it. He says a version of this every morning, the way other men say good morning, and you have learned, the way you've learned everything here, not to argue. There is exactly one correct answer, and you give it. Yes, master, he grunts, which is his highest form of praise before daylight, and lifts the ash-coloured wig on its block down from the shelf, turning it slowly against the window's grey glow, reading the set of last night's curls the way your father reads clouds. And this is where we should stop for one moment, you and I, because you're standing in that room with grease on your face and a dead man's argument coming down the street outside, and you deserve to know what you've actually been apprenticed into. Not the shop, the system, the vast, gleaming, slightly insane system that this one small room feeds. Because here's the thing about the white heads of Versailles, the thing the portraits never tell you. White wasn't a colour. White was a supply chain. And when I say supply chain, I need you to understand what that means in 1774. This isn't a product on a shelf. This is fat carted in from slaughter yards and boiled down in back rooms. This is wheat grown by men like your father, milled to starch, ground to dust, and thrown by the fistful over the heads of men who have never once stood in a breadline. This is the hair of the poor, cut at market fairs and weighed out like tobacco, walking around on the heads of the rich. Every single gleaming head up that hill is a small factory's worth of other people's labour, other people's animals, other people's harvests, and other people's hair, refined, scented, curled, and taught to deny where it came from. You keep the gleam alive. That's the job. That's the whole job. And in the year we're about to live through together, the gleam and the grain are going to come to a reckoning in the streets of this exact town on a spring day with a real date on it, and you will be standing close enough to watch the two halves of your life, the wheat you were born in and the powder you serve, meet each other at last. But that's spring. It's March. The fat is settling. The fire needs wood. And the first client's wig has to be at the palace by 8. The day is already moving. Move with it. Getting dressed takes 2 minutes because you own almost nothing and sleep in most of it. Breeches, stockings darned at both heels, the buckled shoes that were your one extravagance and pinch anyway. Over your 4-day shirt goes the thing that actually matters. A long grey linen overshirt, washed soft, that reaches your knees, your powder smock. In this trade, the smock is the uniform and the confession at once. By evening it will be greased at the cuffs, dusted white at the shoulders, and singed somewhere, and every mark on it is the day's work written down. Your one bit of pride hangs at your belt, a boxwood comb, wide-toothed, that you bought with your own 3 sous from a peddler your first winter here. It's nothing. Every apprentice owns one, but it's yours, bought with money you were given for holding a gentleman's horse, and when you touch it you remember that in 4.5 more years you will be a journeyman, and journeymen are paid. Appearances matter in this town. They matter more than food, and I mean that literally, and before this night is over you'll see the proof. The workshop in full candlelight is the size of a farm kitchen, maybe 18 feet by 14, and every inch of it works for its keep. The fireplace with its swinging pot arm, the scarred oak table down the middle, black at one end with iron burns. On the wall the curling irons hang in a row by size like a peal of bells, from fat tubes for deep rolls down to slim rods for the tight little curls that sit above a gentleman's ears. Buckles they're called, and God help you if they droop. There's the hackle, an upright board bristling with iron spikes for drawing hair through until it lies straight and clean, and every strand agrees with its neighbours. There's the tressing frame in the corner, a small loom strung with silk threads, where hair is woven root by root into long thin wefts. Because a wig isn't a bag of hair, it's a garment. Hundreds of feet of woven weft sewn round and round onto a fitted neck cap, and every foot of that weft passed through somebody's fingers 3 hairs at a time. Etienne can weave a yard of weft in a long evening. You can weave most of one badly. And on the shelf above it all sit the blocks, the wooden heads with their chalked names, waiting. And on the floor by the table sits a plain linen bag, half full, tied at the neck. I want you to notice that bag because you'll see it again. Every night, last job before bed, you sweep the workshop floor and every clipping goes into it. Every trimmed end, every combed out strand, every inch of hair too short for weft. Once a month the master weighs that bag on the shop balance and sells the contents to the felt trade and the padding trade. Because in 1774 hair is money the way string and candle ends and bones are money, which is to say, real money, and nobody at your level throws real money on the fire. The sweep bag is the shop's small change. The master knows its weight the way he knows his own name. Remember the bag. Upstairs the house is waking. Madame Delatour's tread crosses the ceiling, a small, quick woman with a face like a closed purse, who cooks for the household and keeps its books, and of the 2 duties the books are the ones that keep her up at night. Here is the arithmetic of a fashionable trade in a royal town, and it deserves half a minute of your time because it explains almost everything you'll see tonight. The people of quality do not pay, not never, eventually. Sometimes. The chevalier, whose ash-grey wig is going up the hill this morning, has an account in Madame's ledger that stood at 371 livres as of Lady Day for 2 new wigs, a year of dressing, powder, and pomatum. 371 livres is more than a labourer earns in a year. It is also, apparently, an amount a gentleman may owe his wigmaker indefinitely, because pressing a man of birth for payment is a good way to lose every client of birth you have. So the quality take the shop's goods on credit and its labour on credit, and the shop pays its own suppliers in coin, and the space between those 2 facts is where Madame Delatour lives, at her ledger, adding columns by rushlight, her lips moving. Nothing at Versailles is allowed to look like what it is. The shop looks prosperous. The shop is owed more than it owns. By 6 the street outside has found its voice. The Rue de Satory runs through the parish of Saint-Louis, the working south side of a town that exists for one reason only, and the morning sounds are the sounds of that reason getting out of bed. Shutters banging up, a water carrier's yoke creaking under 2 full pails, cartwheels on the paving, a baker's boy crying loaves while the smell of them drifts down the street and pulls at your stomach like a hook. Half a century ago, they say, this was Hunting Heath and a middling village. Then the palace swallowed the hill, and a town of tailors, cooks, grooms, laundresses, chairmen, candle sellers, and wigmakers grew up at its feet like mushrooms round an oak. Tens of thousands of people now, and nearly every one of them, one way or another, paid out of the same purse, and serving the same few thousand gleaming heads. The trade you serve even gave your language a word or two. Perruque. The French had it from the Italian peruca centuries back when false hair was still a scandal instead of a uniform. And the English, across the water, are already saying something you've probably said yourself. Bigwig. A big man wore a big wig, the great full-bottomed floods of curl you see in old portraits of judges and dead kings, and the word for the wig became the word for the man. That's already a thing in 1774. When you say it today, you're speaking this street. The shop door rattles at 7, and the day's first face belongs to Therese. Therese Michaud, 17, laundress, with a basket on her hip taller than she is wide, and forearms a smith would respect. Her family washes for half the parish. Her father carts grain and flour for the market when there's work. Her mother and brother keep the wash-house. And every second morning she collects from the shop its load of powdering gowns as towels, and delivers back the last load, folded white, smelling of ashlie and river. She and you have an arrangement of long standing. She pretends your smock is the filthiest article ever surrendered by a Christian, and you pretend her prices are ruinous, and neither of you smiles until the very end. And it is, if you're honest with yourself at 16, the best minute of most days. She thumps the clean basket onto the counter and eyes the greasy bundle you hand over. Again, what do you do in this house? Wrestle the pig before you boil it. We can't all stand in clean water all day. Stand in. She stops herself, actually offended, which means one to you. She hoists the bundle, and then, at the door, not joking at all any more, tell Madame the price of Ashley's gone up again, and tell her my father waited at the corn market till noon on Saturday, and came home with half a load. Half, at market, in Versailles. She shifts the basket. You people go through more wheat in a week than we do. She means the powder. She's gone before you can decide whether she was still teasing. She wasn't. File that away too. At 7:30 the master comes through in his working clothes with the ash-grey wig boxed for travel, and Etienne, up at last, moving carefully, smelling of last night's tavern, is sent to the back to weave weft as a penance he accepts with a wink at you the moment the master turns, and you get the order you've been hoping for all morning. Nicholas, coat. You'll carry, and you'll pump. His lordship's man asked for the full dressing. A pause while he settles his own street wig. Plain, brown, respectable, a tradesman's wig, precisely calculated to be forgettable. And you'll keep your mouth shut in the corridors, and your eyes down on the staircases, and you will not gawk in the court of honour like you did in January. Yes, master. You gawked like a heifer at a fair, boy. Yes, master. He looks at you a moment longer. Something that is almost but not legally a smile. It's a palace, he says. It's also a customer. Remember which one pays you. He hands you the wig box, and its weight settles into your arms like a sleeping cat. It doesn't, by the way. Pay us. Remember that too. and you're out the door into the March morning, into the town built on one hill's appetite, walking uphill with another man's hair in a box toward the largest building you've ever seen or will ever see, where the day's real work, the fat, the flour, the itch and the gleam is waiting for its audience. The palace opens early. Versailles opens with the sun, and by the time you crest the rise, the avenue is already a slow river of everything. Carriages, water carts, fish barrows, sedan chairs jogging between chairmen in livery, a herd of actual sheep being driven God knows where, clerks, soldiers, masons, and boys like you, dozens of boys like you, each carrying some piece of the machine, a covered dish, a sword in for repair, a box of candles, a box of hair. The three great avenues of the town all aim at the same point like spokes at a hub, and at the hub, behind its gilded gates, the chateau spreads its wings wider than your whole village, stone and glass and gold leaf catching the early sun until it hurts to look at. Every time. It takes your breath away every time, and you hate that it does, and you look anyway. Half a century of kings built this, and the men who set its stones are your grandfather's generation. There are masons in this town who worked on the chapel as boys and drink small beer 2 streets from your shop. It's that recent. It's that real. And it is hungry in a way no building you've ever heard of is hungry. They say 10,000 people are fed, warmed, dressed, lit, and powdered out of this one hill every day of the year, and having now seen the provision carts queuing before dawn, nose to tail down the avenue like beads on a string, you believe it. But you can't stand there forever. You've got a heifer's reputation to live down, and the Chevalier de Sérigny is waiting for his hair. You don't go in through the gilded gates, obviously. Tradesmen enter Versailles the way blood enters a body, through the small vessels, the side courts and service stairs, past a Swiss guard who knows the master by sight and you by association, into a back staircase that has never once been gilded and never will be. And it's on that staircase, every single visit, that the palace tells you its first secret, the one no engraving has ever printed. The smell. The state rooms, when you cross their edges, smell of beeswax candles, orange trees in silver tubs, perfume, powder, and warm gilt. A smell like wealth itself, a smell you could sell. And the back corridors 3 steps away through a hidden door smell of piss. I'm sorry, but you'd smell it, so you should know it. Thousands of human beings live, work, wait, and scheme in this building. The provision for necessary functions has never kept pace with the ambition of the architecture, and the dark turns of the service stairs pay the price. Splendour in front drains behind. The whole century in one staircase. Nothing at Versailles is allowed to look like what it is. It's the master's proverb, but the building said it first. The Chevalier de Sérigny lodges high under the roofs of one of the wings, and here's the second thing the engravings won't tell you. The lodging of this silk-clad man, this man with 371 leaves of your shop's labour on her account, is one low chamber and a closet, which he counts as a triumph, because it is a chamber and a closet inside Versailles. Men of ancient names scheme for years for a garret up here, because to lodge in the palace is to exist, and to exist near the king is the only career there is. The chamber is crowded with borrowed elegance, a good bed, a better mirror, a card table with genuinely beautiful legs, and it is cold, and it smells of yesterday's powder, tobacco, and the chamber pot behind the screen. Sérigny himself is 34, handsome the way a portrait is handsome, from the intended distance, and he is sitting at his mirror in a dressing gown with his head bare, and his head is stubble, cropped to the skin, grey-brown, a little egg-shaped. This is the great open secret of the age of wigs. Under every majestic head of curl in this palace is a shaved scalp, shorn once a week or oftener, because the wig fits closer that way, sits cooler that way, and, let's be honest, the way the century itself was honest in its private letters. Because whatever lives in hair is easier to fight on a mown field than in a forest. We'll get to what lives in hair. Patience. Delateur, the Chevalier says to the mirror by way of greeting. Then, seeing you in it too. And the little Beauceron, has he learned to stand still yet? Or will he moo at us again? You said one word in January when he asked you directly where you were from. One word, Galladon. Apparently it mooed. This is what you are here. Not disliked, which would take effort, but a small fixed piece of furniture that occasionally amuses. You put down the box, set out the gown, and stand against the wall with your eyes at the middle distance, and you do it well, because you have practiced, and because the first time you fidgeted the master looked at you in a way you have no wish to be looked at twice. The dressing begins, and I want to walk you through it properly, all of it, because this, multiplied by hundreds of heads, every morning forever, is the machine you now serve. First, the gown, the peignoir, a full-length powdering robe of the linen Thérèse washes, wrapped over the Chevalier's clothes and tied at the neck so that what is about to happen doesn't ruin 100 leaves of silk. Then the master lifts the ash-grey wig from its box, and it goes onto the shaved head with 2 hands and a small settling shake, like setting a crown or a hen. Adjust, anchor, check the mirror line of the front edge against the brow. The wig is a tie wig, the working uniform of a gentleman's mourning, curls tight at the sides in their neat rows of buckles, the back hair drawn into a queue bound in black ribbon. Under the master's fingers, yesterday's shape wakes up. Papers come off the side curl, the papilotes, the little folded squares that held each curl overnight, and each released curl gets the warm iron, just so, just for a breath, and the smell of hot hair and old grease rises around the Chevalier's head like weather. Then the pomatum. Out of the shop jar comes a scoop of what you made at dawn, stiff, pale, lavender and orange over that faint undernote it never quite loses. And the master works it down each curl and along the roots with his fingertips, fat, smoothing hair the way butter smooths a crust. This is the base coat. This is what the powder will cling to. Without fat, no white. Remember that. The gleam of Versailles is glue first, and the glue is rendered animal. Then the cone. From the box you hand the master a funnel of stiff paper, and the Chevalier, this elegant man, this ornament of the court, takes it and holds it over his own face, wide end pressed around brow and chin, like a man about to be shy or shot. It is the single most ridiculous sight the age has to offer, and nobody in the room is allowed to think so. The cone is his gas mask, because now comes the powder, and the powder goes everywhere. Nicolas, that's you. You take up the Bellows, a small pair, kin to the fireplace kind, its chamber charged with finely milled starch. And you pump, steady even circling as the master directs with little turns of his wrist, and a pale storm breaks over the Chevalier's head. Powder rolls off the curls, catches the window light in a drifting cloud, settles on the gown, the floor cloth, your sleeves, your eyelashes. The master follows with the puff, a fat pad of swan's down, pressing and coaxing the white into the fat layer into layer, until every curl is frosted even, and the ash-grey wig has become the colour of moonlight. and the man under it has stopped being a tired 34-year-old with debts and become a chevalier. You breathe through your nose shallow. You learned that the hard way too. Wheat starch lies sweet and dusty on the back of the throat, and a coughing apprentice is a catastrophe, because a cough at the wrong moment throws the pattern, and the pattern is the whole art. By the end, your nostrils are rimmed white. By the end of every dressing, in every powder room in this palace, and the great households have exactly that, a powder room, a small chamber sacrificed entirely to this daily blizzard. Some boy looks like you look now, flowered, like a loaf about to prove. Hold that thought. Flowered. We're coming back to it in the spring, and it will not be funny then. The cone comes down. The chevalier studies the mirror, turns his head left, right, watching the light run along the frost. And then he does the thing you've been waiting for him to do, the thing he always does, the thing half the heads in this palace do the moment they think the mirror is done judging them. He picks up the slim ivory rod lying on the dressing table, a stem the length of your forearm, ending in a tiny carved hand with 5 perfect little fingers, slides it up under the edge of the wig, and scratches, eyes half closing, jaw loosening. The small, private bliss of a man reaching the itch he cannot be seen to have. The scratcher goes back on the table. Nobody says anything, because there is nothing to say. The itch is universal and unmentionable, like debt. Head scratchers like that one are sold in this town in ivory, in silver, in ebony, and every wigmaker knows exactly why. And every client would sooner discuss his mistress than his scalp. Some of the itch is honest, a shaved head under a fitted cap of someone else's hair, sealed with fat and flour in a hot room, itches on its own merits, and some of it is passengers, and the passengers are real, and I'll give you the honest version when we're back in the workshop with the door shut. Remember the little ivory hand. You'll see it once more before we're done, on a morning when the whole town is scratching at something much bigger, while the master unties the gown, carefully gathering the powder fall into it like a man folding up a snowdrift. The chevalier stands, turns, and becomes for a moment almost gracious. The grey is good, Delatour. Better than the grey I saw at the card table on Monday. The card table's grey belonging to a rival gentleman of his circle, dressed by a rival shop, which is the actual sentence being spoken. You'll have the boy bring the second wig Thursday, and pomatum, the good pomatum, mind, the bear, you keep your face still. We'll get to the bear. The bear is tomorrow's story, and it's a better one than he knows. And the account, Monsieur le Chevalier, the master says, with a bow measured to the millimetre, when it should be convenient. Assuredly, says the Chevalier, in the tone men use for the word assuredly, and the audience is over, and the account is now 380-something, and everyone bows and nobody pays. On the stairs down, boxes lighter, you do the arithmetic, because your master has trained you to, and because you can't not. The dressing this morning, 1 livre 10 sous on the book. The Chevalier keeps 4 wigs in rotation and is dressed daily. Call it, with powder and pomatum and repairs and 1 new wig a year. 600 or 700 leaves of hair alone every year, for 1 minor gentleman who lodges in a garret. A journeyman mason, out there on the endless repairs of this palace, earns his 20 or 25 sous a day, 300 leaves in a good year for a family. 1 man's frost costs 2 men's bread, and there are, at a conservative guess, several thousand frosted heads on this one hill. That difference, multiplied across a whole gleaming town, is not a detail of the age. It is the age. You're 16, and you're beginning, dimly, in the service stairwell that smells the way it smells, to understand what you are part of. Stop counting, the master says without turning around. He can hear you think. It's bad for the digestion. But he doesn't tell you you're wrong. The next morning belongs to the bear, which means the next morning belongs to Blaze, which means the next morning belongs to the worst smell in Versailles, and in a town with this many stables and this few drains, that title is contested. Blaise Roche is the shop's fat man. I mean that as a trade, though it also happens to be a description. A tallow chandler and renderer, broad as his own doorway, who keeps a yard on the low southern edge of town near the butcher's quarter, downwind, in theory, of everyone who matters. The yard is where the animal side of the gleam gets handled, and you are sent there with a barrow every week or two, and you have learned to eat breakfast before you go, not after. You smell the yard 3 streets away. It arrives in stages, like an argument. First tallow smoke, which is almost respectable. Half the candles in your life smell like that. Then the darker note underneath, the one that coats, raw suet, blood warm from the shambles, and the sweetish edge of scraps that waited a day too long. And then you turn in at the gate, and it's not a smell anymore, it's a climate. Steam rolls off 2 great coppers where kidney fat goes down to liquid over slow fires. A boy younger than you skims grey scum off the top with a flat ladle, flicking it into a bucket with the bored precision of 10,000 repetitions. Racks of drying tallow, barrels ranked by grade, a dog of no describable breed, gleaming with health, who is the happiest creature you know. The wig boy, Blaise says, wiping hands on an apron that has passed beyond cleaning into geology. Come for the aristocracy of my pigs. Here's what you're buying, and what it's for, because this is the actual recipe of elegance, and hardly anyone alive today has ever heard it out loud. The pomatum that goes on those shining heads starts here, as hard white fat, pork leaf lard for the everyday, beef sweet to stiffen the mix for hard pomatum, the sticks used to slick and hold. Back at the shop it gets rendered again, washed in clean water, worked and rinsed till it gives up as much of itself as fat can be persuaded to give, then beaten with essence, lavender, bergamot, orange flower, a little clove in winter, until it comes up smooth and pale as fresh butter and smells, if you've done your work, like a garden with something underneath it. That's the everyday jar. That's what you rubbed into the chevalier's curls. And then there's the bear. Bear's grease is the luxury of the trade. The century believes, and I'll flag it exactly as it deserves, believes, on no evidence a physician of our own day would accept, that the fat of a bear, that shaggy, vigorous, notoriously well-furred animal, strengthens hair and even makes it grow. So bear's grease sells at many times the price of pig, and gentlemen ask for it by name, the way the chevalier asked. And here is the part I promised you, the part that makes this a workshop story and not an advertisement. France does not contain enough bears. Nowhere near. The pamphleteers and the satirists of the age said it themselves gleefully in print, that if every pot of bear's grease sold in Paris were honest, the forests of Europe would be picked clean to the last cub. What contemporaries claimed, and what your own 2 eyes in this yard confirm, is that the bear of commerce is mostly pig with a biography. Blaise keeps, on a high shelf in his shed, a small barrel with genuine bear fat in it, bought from a huntsman dealer, rank and dark and real, and he'll show you the pour he keeps in salt as a certificate. and into every batch of the master's bare pomatum goes a measured spoonful of the true bear, for the smell of it, folded into a great deal of the finest white pork. In the shop it is potted into a particular crock, squat, glazed, with a blue-painted lid, and the blue-lidded crock sits on the workshop's top shelf like a small heresy nobody has written down, and it sells, by the half-ounce, for more than Therese's family earns washing your smock for a month. Is it a lie? You asked the master once, your first year, with the crock between you. He didn't answer straight away. He weighed out the true bear, one spoonful, level, like an apothecary. The Chevalier buys a story, he said at last. The story is, I am the kind of man who has bear's grease. We sell him the story, and the story is true the moment he believes it. The fat is just the paper it's written on. Then he looked at you over the scales. But you'll never sell short weight, and you'll never sell rancid, because those are lies about the customer's senses, and a man's senses, unlike his vanity, eventually notice. Remember the blue-lidded crock. Come summer, it's going to try to ruin you. Because that's the other truth of the fat trade, the one that hangs over every pomatum jar in France, like a sentence not yet pronounced. Fat turns. Fat is alive the way a truce is alive. Keep it cool, keep it clean, keep water out and air off, and it holds. Sweet, obedient, faintly floral. Let the summer heat get into it, and it goes rancid, and rancid fat on a gentleman's head, warmed by his scalp under a fitted wig in a crowded salon, announces itself to a whole room with a smell like old walnuts and a candle snuffed in butter, and there is no perfume in Provence that can fully shout it down. The lavender is not decoration. The lavender is the first line of defence. Every wig maker in this town spends the summer months in a quiet running battle against chemistry, and the ones who lose clients. You've heard the master say it with a straight face. More reputations in this trade die in August than in any duel. You load the barrow. Firm white lard in cloth, a block of sweet, a small sealed pot of the true bear, and, because Blaise's blay, a slab of dripping for Madame's kitchen, thrown in unasked. He always does it, always gruffly, always with the same words. For the little ledger woman, she feeds you too thin. He has never met Madame Delatour. It's the standing mystery of the yard, and you have never dared ask. And the one time Etienne teased him about it, Blay held Etienne's entire head in one hand, gently, like a melon he was considering, until the subject changed on its own. At the gate, Blaise stops you with a word he doesn't usually bother with. Boy, tell your master the shambles were short this week. He scratches his jaw. Grain's climbing, so folk sell their beasts early rather than feed them dear, so there's meat now and there'll be none later, and fat follows meat the way I follow dinner. Tell him, buy ahead. A pause. He'll understand. He was poor once. It's the poor who understand supply. You will remember much later that the first person who told you what was coming was the fat man, in March, reading the whole year in his barrels. The men up the hill had ministers, courtiers, and clever economists in their libraries. Blaise had suet, and Blaise was right first. Back at the shop the afternoon is rendering, and rendering is your purgatory and your apprenticeship in one. Chop the fat small. Your knuckles ache and your fingers shine, and the smell moves in under your nails, where it will live now, a resident. Melt it slow, too hot, and it tastes of the fire, and yes, tastes. The master tests pomatum base on his tongue like a cook, And the day he first made you do the same, you thought of your mother's soup pot and had a complicated moment about your life. Skim, strain through linen, wash, work the water through and wring it out again, over and over, your wrists burning, the cooling fat squeaking against the sides of the basin. Then the beating, essence in, drop by drop, the paddle going round until your shoulder gives out and Etienne takes over, mocking your arm, and the grey mass turns slowly white and glossy, and becomes, officially, no longer fat but pomatum, a word with a Latin ancestor and a price 3 times higher. Etienne, beating, nods at the blue-lidded crock on its shelf. You know what I'd do if I were master. 10 crocks, 50. Bare enough for every fool at court. There's no end of pigs and no end of fools. It's the one trade in France where both supplies are safe. You'd be caught. By who? The bear? He laughs, and you laugh, and the paddle goes round, and you file that away too, not the joke, but the appetite under it. Etienne, nearly 5 years in, counting the months to his freedom, is done being patient. He wants his shop, his sign, his own ledger of unpaid noble debts, and he wants it at 19, not at 40 like the master. Watch him. Boys in a hurry find doors, and not all doors have streets on the other side. By nightfall the workshop smells of lavender over lard. The day's jars stand cooling in a row like little moons, and your forearms have the fine tremble that beating leaves. You sweep the floor, and the clippings go into the linen bag, and the bag goes on its nail. You bank the fire. You climb into the shared bed, and Etienne is already asleep, and through the wall you can hear the faint click of Madame's counters as she adds what the quality owe. Lavender, lard, unpaid gold. You fall asleep inside the recipe of the age, now the powder. Because the fat is only the undercoat, and the thing the whole world remembers about this century, the frost, the moonlight, the white, is wheat. And it is time you handled it with your own hands and felt what it weighs. The shop's powder comes in from a starch maker who buys from the mills of the Beauce, your own country, the plain your father ploughs for another man. It arrives in coarse sacks, £50 to the sack, and the first time you ever hauled one off the carrier's cart you stopped dead in the street with it on your shoulder, because stamped on the sacking in red was a mark you knew, before you knew your letters. 2 crossed keys. The mark of the mill at home, the tall stone mill 2 villages over, whose sails you could see from your father's fields, the mill your father has carted sheaves to every August of your life. You stood there in the Rue de Sattery with £50 of your own parish on your shoulder, wheat your neighbours sowed, wheat men like your father sweated in, gone to the millstones and then further, refined past bread, past sense, into this. Powder for the heads of Versailles. You didn't say anything to anyone. What was there to say? But every delivery since you've looked for the crossed keys, and about every 3rd sack, there they are, and each time something in your chest is a small movement you have no word for. Keep the crossed keys in your mind's eye. In 14 months you're going to see them again, in a very different street, on a very different day, and everything in your chest will move at once. Understand what's actually in the sack, because the age is precise about its vanities. This isn't flour as your mother knew it, not quite. It's wheat starch, the heart of the grain, soaked and worked and separated and dried in lumps, the same pure white your village used for stiffening a bride's collar. That's the raw material. The shop refines it further, dried before the fire, ground fine, and then sifted. And the sifting is yours, apprentice work forever. through silk gauze stretched on a frame, tap, 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 a snowfall in a box, until what's left running through your fingers is powder finer than any flour that ever touched bread. Powder like cool smoke. Powder that hangs in a sunbeam for a full minute before it condescends to settle. Then it's scented. Dried orris root, mostly, pounded fine, which smells of violets and gives the whole age its ghost flower breath. Some houses tint theirs, grey with a whisper of char, blonde with ochre. You've heard travellers swear that in Paris there are heads powdered pink and pale blue, and you believe it, the way you now believe most things about Paris. But white is king. White is order, cleanliness, dignity, distance from the sweating world. A head properly whitened has no age. Young men look wise, old men look eternal, and it has no yesterday. That's the entire sorcery of it, and the entire cost of it too. White must be renewed every single day, because by evening it has yellowed with fat, streaked with sweat, dimmed with candle smoke. So every morning in every powder room the old day is combed out, clotted greasy crumbs of yesterday's frost raining onto the floor cloth. And this is the part I'd spare you if I were kinder. Up close, a day-old powdered head doesn't look like moonlight. It looks like a pastry left in the rain. And every morning the whole white world is built again from the sack. Now do the arithmetic with me, because you're the son of a wheat farmer, and you cannot help doing it, sifting in the back room, tap, 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 while the master's voice drifts in from the shop. A single full dressing takes between what lands on the head and what lands on everything else. Something like a quarter pound to half a pound of powder, a grand occasion, with the hair built high and the frost laid thick, can take a pound and more. The shop dresses its regulars daily. Call the shop's powder, in an ordinary week, a sack's worth, £50. One middling wigmaker, in one street, in one town. Now count the wigmakers in Versailles. Now add Paris, where the trade counts its masters in the hundreds, and its journeymen in the thousands. Now add every provincial city, every garrison, because the army powders too, soldiers flowering their hair into regulation whiteness on bread rations. Every bishop, every magistrate, every notary who has ever wished to look like a magistrate. The pamphlet writers of the age did this arithmetic in public, and their numbers ran to thousands of tons of wheat. Enough bread for whole cities sifted onto heads in a kingdom that faced hunger somewhere within its borders almost every single year. I'll be straight with you, the way I promised. Their figures were pamphlet figures, angry, rounded, built to wound. Take the exact totals lightly. But the shape of the fact is not in dispute, not then and not now. It was wheat. It was food in a hungry country, worn as a decoration. The moralist said it in print. The priest said it from pulpits. The hungry said it in the bread queue in words nobody wrote down. Even the people wearing it knew. They simply also knew that appearing at court unpowdered was a form of suicide. And between those two knowledges, the powder won every morning. Bread and powder are the same wheat. Say it once and try to unknow it. You can't. You're going to spend the rest of this story failing to unknow it, and so is France. It's a Thursday late in March when the pamphlets themselves arrive in your workshop, through the back door by the pound as trash. The master buys waste paper from a dealer who hauls it out of Paris by the sackful. Spoiled sheets, unsold sermons, seized print runs sold off for wrapping, because a wig shop eats paper the way it eats fat. Powder cones, wrapping for finished wigs. And above all papilotes, the little curl papers, cut in their hundreds from whatever print nobody wanted, folded warm around a curl and its pomatum every night, and unfolded every morning, so that half the heads of quality in this town sleep, if we're precise about it, in yesterday's arguments. Your job, rainy afternoons, the shears and the pile, cut the sheets into squares, stack the squares, never mind the words. You mind the words. You read slowly, winter catechism classes and 18 months of shop labels. But you read, and one grey afternoon, halfway down a smudged page of close print, a line stops your shears. While the poor man lacks a loaf, the great man carries a field of wheat upon his head. You read it twice, lips moving like your mother's at Mass. A field of wheat upon his head. Somewhere in Paris a man sat down, dipped a pen, and wrote out loud the exact thought you have been carrying like contraband since the day the crossed keys rode into the shop on your own shoulder. Nicholas? The master, from the doorway, not sharp. Worse, quiet. You didn't hear him come in, and you don't know how long he's been watching you read. Papers are for curls. Snip. The line about the field of wheat becomes 2 half-lines, and both go on the stack, and some gentleman of the bedchamber will sleep tonight with it coiled against his scalp, and in the morning it will be unfolded, creased, illegible, and thrown on the fire, which is, when you think about it, the century's entire policy on the subject, performed nightly in miniature. But the stack sits in a box under the dressing frame, hundreds of squares deep, and you know which square is which. Remember the box of papillotes. One winter evening, someone in this workshop is going to read a whole sheet out loud, start to finish, and the room will go so quiet you'll hear the fire think, and now, because you've earned it, and because we're safely back in the workshop with the door shut, the passengers, lice. You knew we were coming here. Let's do it honestly and get it done. The documented truth, no more and no less, and then we'll let it lie. The 18th century has lice the way it has weather. Every rank, every age, both sexes. The poor have them worst, but the great are not exempt. And no one who has ever read the private letters and medical manuals of the age doubts it. That, in fact, is one thing the shaved head under the wig is for. A cropped scalp gives the creatures little to hold. A wig can be taken off, and a wig can be treated, sent back to the shop where you comb it through over white paper with a close-toothed comb and watch what drops, then dress it near the warmth till nothing more objects. A gentleman's own hair could make no such visit. His wig can. Strange as it sounds, across 2.5 centuries, the wig was, among everything else it was, an attempt at hygiene. A removable, boilable head of hair for a world that could not wash its own. The fine-toothed combs sell in bone, and boxwood and ivory, and nobody asks what for. The little ivory hands on their long stems scratch through the frost in every gallery in Versailles, and nobody says why. And the tales, workshop legends now, told to every apprentice including you, of monstrous colonies, of a mouse nested in a great lady's unopened coiffure. Those I give you strictly as what the age told about itself, winking, usually about somebody else's clients, usually at a safe distance of years. What contemporaries claimed and what the combs found were not always the same size, but the combs found plenty. You've held the paper, you've counted. Nothing at Versailles is allowed to look like what it is. It gleams like marble from the gallery floor. It lives like a body, close up, under the white. You are learning, this first spring, the whole shape of the machine. The fat from Blaze coppers, the wheat from your own plain, The hair, and we're coming to the hair, from heads poorer than yours, all of it flowing uphill every day to be burned in the great cold fire of appearance. And you're learning the trade's one great manner, harder than any curl, to know all of it, and to show none of it, and to hand the gentleman his mirror with a face as smooth as the pomatum. The mirror never lies to him. Everyone else in the room is paid too. In April the hair comes, and with the hair comes Guillaume. Old Guillaume is a hair merchant, and if you had told your mother such a trade existed, she'd have crossed herself, and then, being your mother, asked the price. He's past 60, dried and knotted like vine wood, and he spends most of the year on the roads with a strong box, a pair of scales, and a canvas roll of shears, working the market fairs of the West Country, Normandy, Brittany, deep places where the women still wear their hair long under the coif and the money is scarcer than the rain. He comes through Versailles twice a year with his packs, and the master buys from him before he buys from anyone, because Guillaume never lies about hair, about everything else cheerfully, never about hair. The buying happens on the big table, all other work cleared, and it is the nearest thing this trade has to high mass. Out of the packs come the bundles, tresses 2 feet 30 inches, a yard long, each tied at the cut end, each weighed on the shop balance to the 1/4 ounce, and laid out by colour on white cloth. And the colours have a market, and the market tells you things about the world you didn't ask to know. Common browns are the daily bread of the trade. True black keeps its price. But the money, the silly money, is at the 2 pale ends of life. Fine flaxen hair, a child's blonde, rare on a grown head, and clean natural grey, rarer still, because the poor go grey late or dead first, and a full head of long silver hair means a country woman who kept it 60 years, through fevers and childbeds and coifs, and then had a reason to sell what 60 years had made. Grey sells for multiples of brown. The whitest heads of the age are built ounce by ounce from the actual old age of the actual poor. Feel, Guillaume says, and drapes a 30-inch tress of chestnut across your palms like a christening. It's heavier than you expect. Warm, almost, the way rope is warm. Norman, grew by the sea, you can feel the strength of it. One head, one growing, 15 years of some girl's life. Weigh it. You weigh it. 5 ounces and a half. I paid 12 livres for that at the fair at Guibray, to the girl's own mother, cash on the cloth. He watches your face so you keep it smooth, and he sees you keep it smooth, which for Guillaume is the same as flinching. Say it, boy. It's a year of bread. It's 2 braids of it. She had a wedding to pay for, or rent, or a bailiff at the door. I stopped asking why 30 years ago. The answer's always one of 3 things, and none of them are gay. He takes the tress back, ties it with a twist. They come to the fair in their best coif. They sit on the stool behind my sheet. Behind, mind. No woman wants the parish watching. The shears go snip. They cry or they don't. I pay honest weight, and a year on I can't tell you one face. But the hair I remember, I know this tress like a shepherd knows a ewe, and you think, you can't not, of your sister Marguerite 3 years back, the travelling buyer at the Michaelmas fair, the 12 livres that got your family's rent over the winter. Your father was sick. She wore her coif full for a year and let everyone assume, the whole family let everyone assume, nothing at Versailles is allowed to look like what it is. Well, nothing in Galadon either, it turns out. The rule is the same at both ends of the road. Only the price is different. That evening, packs sold and supper eaten, Guillaume smokes his pipe on the workshop step and you sit on the lower one, and he delivers unasked the lesson you'll still own when everything else in this story is dust. Every wig in that palace grew in the rain on a poor head. The pipe glows, fades. Fat from the shambles, wheat from the plough, hair from the poor. That's the white boy, the whole of it. There is nothing in the gleam that didn't come up from below. And the one thing the gleam requires, the one thing it truly cannot survive, is being seen for what it is. So they buy the hair behind a sheet, and they render the fat downwind, and they never, ever ask what the powder would have baked into. He knocks the pipe out against his heel, a little firework in the dark. The gleam must never learn where it comes from. That's your trade. You're not a barber boy. You're a man who keeps a secret the whole world is standing inside of. Try not to become the secret yourself. That's what you take from it, lying awake that night. He didn't say that part. You added it, and it frightened you, and you didn't know why yet. While we're at the table with the scales out, take the gild, because the gild is the water this whole shop swims in, and you'll need it before winter. Your master doesn't merely practice a trade. He owns a license to it. The wigmakers are an organised corporation. Masters, sworn officials, statutes, the lot. And the right to keep an open shop is a purchased privilege, numbered and limited, bought dear and defended dearer. In Paris the masters run to many hundreds, and their offices change hands for sums that would buy farms. Here in the king's own town the community is smaller but no softer. What the license buys is the right to exist in daylight. The sign over the door, the apprentice bound by contract. 6 years, like yours, registered before a notary. The journeymen hired by the year, and above all protection, because the corporation's sworn officers, the jurés, have the right of inspection and seizure, and they use it. Twice since you arrived you've seen a visitation. The jurés arrive in their good black coats, 2 masters of the community with a clerk, and it is exactly as warm as a customs search because that's what it is. Books open, contracts shown, your own indenture read while you stand there being an item in it. Hair stocks eyed, because stolen hair is a known commerce, and a master caught weaving it can be ruined. And always the real quarry, the question under every question, who is working without the license? Because somebody always is. In the garrets of this town and in swarms in Paris there are wigmakers with no mastership and no right. Chambellans, chamber workers, men who finished their years, couldn't raise the price of a license, and now dress hair cheap behind shuttered windows for clients who can't afford the open shops. The corporation hunts them. When the jurés catch one, they seize his tools and his stock. Wig blocks carried off under legal seal like arrested felons. You watched it happen your first winter. 3 streets over, a thin man in the doorway with his hands empty, watching his living go into a handcart, item by item lawfully. And the master, who had brought you deliberately, said only walking home, "That man was somebody's best apprentice once. 6 years, same as yours. Remember where the game puts the ones who almost win it." Etienne watched the same handcart. What Etienne remembered from it, you'll find out around Christmas, and so will he. And so the spring of 1774 runs out, fat and flour, hair and license, the shop breathing in through its suppliers and out through the palace. Thérèse every second morning with the linen and the corn market grumbles, Sérigny's account climbing past 400, the sifting frame going tap, tap, tap. You turn 17 in the last week of April. Madame Delatour, who has never once said a soft word to you, puts an egg on your plate and dares you with a look to remark on it. And you begin to allow yourself the thought every second-year apprentice arrives at eventually. that the world is enormous but steady, that the machine you serve is too big, too old, too well fed to shake or be shaken. Then on the 10th of May, the machine's very heart stops, and you find out what this town is when the music halts. It begins, like most palace news, as a change in the customers' voices. In the last days of April, word comes down the hill that the king is unwell, taken ill out at the Trianon, brought back to his own bed in the great apartment. Louis XV, 64 years old, king for as long as anyone you've ever met can remember. At first a town treats it as it treats all royal ailments, as a market variable. Then a single word gets loose, and the town stops treating it as anything but what it is. Smallpox. You feel the word move through the shop physically, like cold air from an open door. Smallpox is not a king's private misfortune. It's everybody's neighbour. Half your clients' faces carry its pitting. Your own mother buried a child of it before you were born. And the king has never had it. Everyone suddenly knows this fact. Everyone repeats it. Which means the sick room up the hill holds an old man meeting for the first time, the thing that farm children meet at 6. For 12 days the whole hill holds its breath, and the shop feels it in the strangest way, through appointments. The courtiers still must be dressed. More than ever, faction is a full-time occupation when a reign is ending, but the dressings go quiet. Men sit under the cone in silence, or trade 3 murmured sentences over your head about who has been seen in whose antechamber, and which rising men are suddenly very warmly greeted, and which great lady has already, prudently, quietly, been sent away from the palace. You pump the bellows, the powder falls. Nobody makes the smallest joke because nobody knows yet which jokes the next reign will punish. He dies on the 10th of May, 1774 in the afternoon. The story the whole world tells afterward, that a lit candle stood in the sick-room window to be snuffed when the king was gone, and that its going out launched the news. Take that one as it comes to you. It's the kind of detail the age loved too much to leave unimproved. What's documented is grim enough without it. The disease had done what it does and worse. The accounts of those final days agree on the thing nobody could pretend away, which was the smell. The body of the most Christian king had begun its decay before death finished its business, and the room, they said, could hardly be endured. Amid the gilt and the mirrors and the orange trees, that. Nothing at Versailles is allowed to look like what it is, until, 1 week in May, everything did. And the moment he dies, the palace performs the single most honest act you will ever see it perform. A sound rolls through the state apartments. One of the Queen's women, remembering it years later, said it was like thunder, the sound of the entire court running in silk, all of them at once, away from the dead man's door and toward the apartments of a 19-year-old boy who's just become Louis XVI. Memoir talk, yes, I flag it as I promised. But no historian doubts the substance, because the substance was the court's whole nature. Power had moved down the corridor, and the corridor moved after it at a run. The old king is buried at night, and the town sees it, and you see it, because half of Versailles turns out in the dark along the avenue to watch. There's no lying in state to speak of. The state of the body forbids it. Everyone knows why, and nobody says it. Just a lead coffin, they say doubled and packed with spirits, hurried out on the night of the 12th, with an escort more brisk than mournful, bound around Paris for the royal vault at Saint-Denis at something close to a trot. You stand in the crowd with Etienne and watch the torches jog past, and the crowd around you is not weeping. Some of it, near you, quietly, in the country accents of the market end of town, is saying things about the dead man that you will not repeat, and I won't either, because the old king had outlived his love long ago, and the price of bread had been discussed under his window too. It goes by fast, the whole reign, rattling into the dark behind its torches. Well, Etienne says at last into the quiet, new head to dress. And God forgive this trade, but that's the town's whole eulogy, and by Friday it's the town's whole economy. Because here's what a king's death means, one rung down the hill. Mourning. Court mourning full and deep, and mourning is work. The tailors of the town nearly drown. Every soul with pretensions must go into black at once, and the drapers strip their stock to the walls, and the wigmakers, black doesn't touch the powder. A mourning head is a fresh whitened head above a black coat. If anything, the contrast is the whole point. White frost on black cloth, sorrow with excellent grooming, but every head must be newly dressed for a new world, new reign, new patrons, new alliances, a coronation somewhere ahead. Every client the shop has wants to look ready, and wants it this week. For a month the workshop runs from black dark to black dark. Your fingers crack from the lye and the heat. The blue-lidded crock is dipped so often the master remixes twice. Madam's ledger gains 60 pages of beautifully written credit. The shop has never worked harder or been paid less, and the master, grey with fatigue, says the thing he says maybe 5 times in this whole story, so mark it. Feast or funeral, boy. The white must go on. Kings change. The powder doesn't. One more thing from that strange June, because it tells you where the world is trying to go. The new king, 19 years old, does something his grandfather never dared. He has himself inoculated against the smallpox, the arms scratched deliberately, the controlled dose, the modern gamble. He and his brothers together, and the whole kingdom argues about it for a month. Pulpits against surgeons, until it works and everyone pretends they were never against it. A young king, a young science, a young reign. There's real hope in the town that summer, actual hope. You can feel it in the customers under the cone. The old age is buried at Saint-Denis and something cleaner is supposed to be starting. And the young queen, 18, Austrian, lively as a linnet, her hair is about to become the most famous in Europe. Towers and follies you'll hear of all the way down here in the men's trade. But that's the women's side of the street. Another guild of artists and another kind of madness, and it has its own story. This channel has spent a whole night inside it. Tonight we stay with the men, the fat and the flour. Because while the town changes its coat to black, out on the plain the wheat is standing in the fields, green going gold. And the summer of 1774 is about to teach you, personally, painfully, in front of a client, the first law of your materials. Everything you work with was alive once, and nothing that was alive stays obedient forever. July comes in hot, and the workshop becomes a slow oven with a bed in it. The fire must burn. Irons don't heat themselves, so the room sits all day in a wet, fatty warmth, and the smells you'd made peace with renegotiate. You sleep on top of the blanket now. Etienne sleeps on the workshop floor half the nights, claiming the tiles, seniority, and no argument tolerated. The pomatum jars are moved down to the coolest corner of the cellar, next to Madame's butter, an arrangement Madame reviews weekly with the enthusiasm of an occupied nation, and every single morning, first light, before the fire is even fed, the master performs the summer ritual you've come to think of as the shop's true mass. He goes down, uncovers each jar and puts his nose to it, jar by jar, slow, like a physician taking pulses. 'Cause summer is when fat remembers what it is. The disaster, when it comes, picks its moment with the malice of all disasters. The last week of July, and the Chevalier de Serigny has, at last, after a decade of manoeuvring you're given to understand from his valet in instalments, secured the thing itself. He is to be presented in the state apartments, formally noticed, on a Sunday. There will be new clothes, whose bill will astonish some tailor. There will be, from your shop, the second best wig rebuilt to fresh glory. And there will be, because the Chevalier believes in it the way your mother believes in St. Fiacre, the bear. Saturday evening you fetch the blue-lidded crock up from the cellar for the morning, and because you've stood nearly 2 years at the master's elbow, and because his ritual has become your reflex, you lift the blue lid on the counter and put your nose down out of pure habit, and your stomach drops out of the world. Walnuts. Old walnuts and warm candle ends, faint but unmistakable, riding under the lavender like a drunk under a choir. The true bear, that rank, dark spoonful folded through every batch, has turned first, the way strong fat turns, and it is turning the crock around it invisibly, a rot you can't see at all. The pomatum sits there white and smooth and perfect, looking exactly like what it no longer is. Tomorrow morning that smell goes onto a scalp, under a fitted wig, into a hot crowd of the sharpest noses in France, and it will bloom in the heat of the Chevalier's great moment like a corpse under a hearthstone, and every gleaming head within 3 yards will know precisely what it's smelling, because every one of them owns fat that has done the same, and the story will be around the palace by Monday with the shop's name sewn to it. More reputations die in August than in any duel. You stand there maybe 5 full seconds, alone with the crock and the entire future of everyone whose bed you share. Then you carry it, level as the host, up to the master at his supper. Say this for Antoine Delatour. He doesn't waste one breath of that night on blame. One long inhale over the crock, a stillness. Then his coat is off, and the fire is being built, and the shop turns at 9 on a Saturday evening back into a workshop. You melt the whole batch out gently and rework it from its foundations. Wash after wash after wash. Warm water carrying off what it can. Your wrists dead. The basin squeaking. Then fresh essence, doubled, lavender and bergamot, and the master's last card, played from a small vial you've never seen him open. A few drops of true civet, animal answering animal, a musk deep enough to give the undernote somewhere to hide. Then the true test. Past midnight, the two of you grey-faced over the counter. He smears a fingerprint of it on the warm inner skin of his own forearm. Heat brings out truth. Skin is the courtroom, and waits, and smells, and waits. It will hold to Monday, he says at last. Not it's saved. Precision, always. After Monday, the whole crock goes to Blaze for soap, and we begin the bear again. He looks at you then, and he is 54 years old at 1 in the morning, and for a moment he lets you see it. You lifted the lid. Nobody told you to lift the lid. Your habit, master. I've watched you. He turns down the lamp, and then, from the dark stairs, gruff as a door, watching is the whole trade, Nicolie. The curls are just what we sell while we're watching. It's the first time in nearly 2 years he's called you by your name without an order attached. You lie down at 2 and don't sleep at all, and don't care. Sunday delivers the reward this world actually pays. Nothing. The presentation goes perfectly. The Chevalier gleams among the gleaming. The wig is admired. A great personage says something 2 degrees warmer than politeness, and the Chevalier will dine on it for a year. Nobody smells anything but violets and civet and rank. You know, because you were there in the powder room at dawn holding the cone, close enough to count the sweat drops the powder was hiding, and because the valet tells you all of it on Thursday, in instalments. The shop's reward for the rescue is that no story exists. Silence at your level is the standing ovation. You'll never be thanked for the best thing you did all year, and I'd tell you to get used to it, but you already have. That's what the second year of an apprenticeship is. The account for the record now stands at 540 livres. The bear alone went on the book at 4. Rendered pig, rescued at midnight by a farm boy, sold as Poland's finest bear to a man who cannot pay for the pig. Nothing at Versailles. You know the words by now. Say them with me, and let's move on. Because it's August now, and the real news of 1774 isn't in the palace at all. It's in the fields, and it comes to you the way all your news from home comes. A letter in the curé's careful hand, your father's words filtered through the parish's one literate man, flattened into formalities, and then, at the end, not flattened enough. The harvest is short. Rain when they needed sun, then heat when the rain finally mattered, and the ears came in light. Not famine light. The letter is careful. Everyone is careful. The word famine is like the word smallpox, saying it invites it, but short, all across the plain. The rents are not short, notes your father through the curé, in the one sentence that is pure undiluted Aubrey. Marguerite is well. Your mother has had the fever but is mending. They trust you are diligent. They trust God will provide. The curé adds, on his own authority, along the margin, pray for a mild winter. You read it twice, standing by the cold forge of an August evening, and then you go in and do a thing you've never done. You take the day's sweepings to the balance and weigh them, and work out what the bag is worth, and what you are worth. You, entire, your hands, your 6 years, against a winter on the plain when the ears came in light. The bag, perhaps 30 sous. You, nothing for 4.5 more years by contract. You cannot send home so much as the sweepings, because the sweepings are the master's, and the law would call it theft, and the law would be right. Remember that arithmetic. Remember exactly how it felt. That specific helplessness, hair dust on your hands, and family on the plain. Because you're about to spend a winter watching the whole kingdom do the same sum, and in the spring, in the street outside your own door, you'll watch what happens when 1 million people get the same answer at once. Blaise, when you cart the ruined bear batch down to his yard for soap, listens to the whole story. Croc, walnuts, midnight, civet, with his arms folded on his belly, deeply satisfied, a man receiving tribute. Told your master in March, buy a head. He heaves the croc's contents into a soap barrel with a slap. Fat follows meat, meat follows grain, and grain, boy. He wipes his hands down the geological apron, and for once the joke drains out of his face entirely, and what's left underneath is older and harder. A man who was a boy in 1740, which was a year they still measure hunger by in the north. Grain follows the weather, and the weather answers to nobody, not even up the hill. He looks at you. Your people on the plain, they got seed wheat put by, or did they eat it? I don't know. Find out. Whatever it cost you, find out before the snow. He turns back to his coppers, conversation over, and then throws the last of it over his shoulder like a bone to the dog. And tell the little ledger woman, the drippings free till Easter. You never do find out why. Some debts are older than apprentices, and none of your business, and the town keeps its own books. Autumn arrives carrying a name, and the name is Turgot. The new king's new Minister of Finance, an economist, the customers say under the cone, in the tone men reserve for foreign words, a clever, upright, stubborn man with a theory. And on the 13th of September, 1774, the theory becomes law. The grain trade of France is set free. For generations the kingdom has chained its wheat. Rules on who may buy, where it may move, magistrates ordering granaries opened in lean towns. A clumsy old harness built on one blunt idea. Bread comes first before profit and before principle. Turgot's edict cuts the harness. Let grain move where it likes. Let price find price. Merchants will carry wheat toward hunger, the way water runs downhill, and scarcity will cure itself. It is elegant. It may even in a fat year be true. And it has arrived, with the punctuality of tragedy, in the exact autumn when there is not enough wheat to move. A short harvest and a free market, which means that whoever holds grain now holds it like cards waiting, because tomorrow's price will beat today's. In the shop, the clients approve between powderings. Freedom of commerce, monsieur, the modern spirit. Men whose bread has never once in their lives depended on its price. At the market end of town, they don't discuss the theory. They discuss the number every Saturday. And every Saturday the number's a little worse. You feel the change through Thérèse. Through the linen first. The wash gets slower to return because her mother has taken fever, and her brother now hauls sacks at the corn market for whoever's hiring, so the wash house is down to Thérèse and a cousin. Then through the jokes, which stop. The teasing about your smock had run unbroken for a year and a half. An institution, a small covered bridge between your house and hers. One grey October morning she hands over the folded gowns, takes the greasy bundle, says, 9 sous Saturday, the £4 loaf, 9, and leaves. That's the whole visit. The number has eaten the joke. You stand in the doorway holding clean linen for the heads of Versailles and watch her go. And you'd give a month of suppers to know how to say what you're sorry for, since it isn't anything you did, and it's everything you do. Guillaume comes through on his autumn circuit with thin packs and hard news. Hair's short too, he says. When bread climbs, women sell, but buyer's money frightens easy, and his strong box is timid this year. It's Guillaume, on his last evening, who gives you the picture you'll keep. He jerks his chin at the church of Saint Louis, your parish, its dome riding above the roofs, finished only 20 years back. Your own master watched it rise, and says, "Ever seen your trade from above, boy?" He knows the sexton. Guillaume knows everybody. And so, on a bright, cold October afternoon, you climb with him, up past the bells, to the gallery under the dome, and step out into the wind, and the world lies down flat at your feet like a map unrolled for a lesson. There it all is, the whole engine in one eyeful. The palace along its hill, vaster than you ever grasp from the street, its windows catching the sun in a running fire, gardens ruled westward behind it, green geometry to the horizon. The 3 great avenues drive it into the town like a trident. The roofs of your world, you can pick out the Rue de Satory and blaze smoke, and the square of the Marché Notre Dame boxed in by its little pavilions. And then, past the last roofs, opening south and west, the thing the palace people never once look at, the plain, stubble gold, patched brown with plough, running out level to the edge of the sky, the Beauce, home. From up here you can see single carts on the roads, crawling, and every road ties field to mill, to market, to town, thread by thread by thread, and at the centre of the web, gleaming, the hill that eats it all. Look at it, Guillaume says. Wind flattens his few grey hairs. He doesn't sell his own, he says. Nobody's coin is good enough. Wheat that way, hair out west, past seeing, fat down there in blazes smoke, and all of it walks up that hill on its own legs every morning and turns into light. He spits thoughtfully, downwind, a professional. You're one thread of it, boy. One. You're not nothing. A web's made of exactly nothing but threads. But when this web shakes, and it's going to shake, I've been 40 years on those roads, and I can hear it coming through my boot soles. When it shakes, remember, it's never the spider that feels it first. It's the threads. You stand a long time, 17 years old, between the palace and the plain, exactly halfway, which is what you are, which is what you'll be all your life now, whatever happens. Barely a cog. But here, part of it, all of it, the gleam and the grain both. You climb down with the light going amber, and the bells above you tolling 4, close enough to feel in your ribs, and that's the last purely good afternoon of 1774, so I wanted you to have it whole. 10 sous by Martinmas, 10.5 by Christmas week. The winter is hard and settles in early, and the shop burns the master's carefully husbanded wood while the clients discuss, under the cone, how bracing the cold is for the constitution. And in the last dark week of December the year finds one more thing to take, and it happens in your own workshop, and the linen bag on its nail is at the middle of it. You'd noticed without letting yourself notice. That's the truthful way to say it. The sweep bag had been filling slower since autumn. You sweep the same floors, the same trimmings fall, and yet month by month the bag weighed in lighter, and you'd told yourself the trade was thin. Hair was short. Guillaume had said so himself. And Etienne had money. Small money. Tavern money. A new hat once. But an apprentice's money arrived from exactly nowhere, and you knew the size of nowhere, and you didn't add it up because he sleeps in your bed and shares your bread and taught you the tressing frame with real patience the whole of your first winter, and there are sums you don't run on people you owe. Madame Delatour ran it. Of course she did. She weighs everything twice, that woman, grief included. The master doesn't shout. That's the terrible discovery of that night. That 54 years old and butcher-shouldered, at the full pitch of a rage you can feel through the floorboards, Antoine Delatour goes quiet. It comes out in pieces, in the workshop by one candle, the whole household standing. Etienne had been skimming the sweepings, the best of them, the long combings, the weft-worthy strands, and selling them in Paris, through a dealer who doesn't ask, to a chambellan who can't afford Guillaume's prices. Small thefts, a handful at a time, months of them. Perhaps 40 livres all told. 40 livres against this. Theft from a master, by his own indentured apprentice, 6 months short of his freedom. If the master goes to the corporation, Etienne's contract is broken, and his 6 years are ash. No certificate, no journeyman's papers, no trade. Everything his family paid, everything he stood and stirred and woven since he was 14. Ash, and the corporation's officers would applaud the master for striking the match. Etienne stands by the tressing frame he's worked half his life, and he doesn't deny it, which is the one wise thing left in reach, and his face. Cocksure Etienne, 4 yards of weft in an evening Etienne. His face is the face of the thin man in the doorway watching the handcart. He found the door, you think, stupidly, From your place against the wall. Boys in a hurry find doors. Why, the master says, not even a question, a wait. And Etienne, because he's broken already, tells the exact truth. Because I'm 6 months from my papers and 40 years from a license, master. You know the price of a mastership. You paid it. 20 years a journeyman dressing other men's clients. That's what's in front of me. That's what's in front of all of us. There's no room in this trade at the top, and you know it. I wanted... And there it fails him, because what he wanted was nothing at Versailles is allowed to look like what it is. Wanted it for himself. The shop, the sign, the ledger, the gleam, and the only ladder anyone left leaning against that wall was made of stolen hair. The silence after that goes on, I'd guess, a full minute. The candle spits. Madame's face is a closed purse, and then the master renders his verdict, and it teaches you more about the man than 2 years of mornings. The 40 leaves go on your account at interest, and you'll work them off after your term, at journeyman's wages in this shop where I can see you. The corporation hears nothing. Your father hears nothing. A breath. And you'll never touch the bag again. Nicola weighs the sweepings now every night and enters the weight in Madame's book, and that's how, at 17, you become the auditor of the floor, the poorest person in the household, keeping its smallest account, nightly, in ink, while Etienne watches from the bed you still share. The first 3 nights are the longest of your apprenticeship. On the 4th, in the dark, Etienne says to the ceiling, "It's not you I mind." He chose the one punishment with a witness in it. He's cleverer than both of us. A silence. Then, very low, the only apology he'll ever issue. "Mind your weights, Beauceron. I'll check your sums." And by some grace native to 19-year-olds and no one else, it becomes, within a month, almost a joke, and the bed stays warm, and something between you is scarred over stronger than it was. I said the shape of his wanting mattered. Hold both of this winter's lessons side by side, because the spring is going to weld them. Up the hill, men who cannot pay owe hundreds and are bowed to. Down here, a boy who stole 40 is bound in ink and interest. The age does know how to collect debts. It just knows it downward. 11 sous in January. The cold locks in. The mill streams freeze and the mills with them. Even the palace ponds are cut for ice. In the shop you now do dawn errands to the baker's for Madame, because bread queues form before light, and an apprentice's time is the cheapest thing the household owns. You stand in the dark with your breath frosting among the maids and porters and old men of the parish, all of you stamping, watching the baker's shutter, and the talk in the queue is low and even and terrifying precisely because it isn't angry yet. Prices are recited like a rosary. Somebody's cousin in Pontoise, somebody's brother laid off the palace works. The word they use for the men who hold grain back is monopolaire, hoarder, and it's said flat informationally, a category being agreed on in advance, the way a court agrees on definitions before it hears the case. And one iron-black February evening, the box under the dressing frame has its moment at last. It's after supper. The household is in the workshop for the warmth. Madame at her ledger, the master rebottoming a caul, Etienne winding silk, you cutting papillotes from the waste paper pile, tap of the shears, and you come to a sheet you recognise. Same close print, same smudged type as the one that stopped you in March. And instead of cutting, you read, silently then not, "Master, may I?" You hold it up. It's about the trade. He should say papers are for curls. He looks at you a long moment over his spectacles. He knows exactly what it is. He buys the waste paper, Nothing enters this shop unweighed, and what he says is, read it then, aloud if your letters can bear it. So you read. Slowly, by tallow light, a pamphlet from the capital, one of the hundreds the freed grain trade has hatched, and this one has done its sums. So many thousand heads powdered daily in Paris and at the court, so much starch to a head, so many pounds a year, so many settiers of wheat, so many 4-pound loaves that wheat would have made, so many families those loaves would have fed, while the poor of the parishes stand in the frost from 4 in the morning. The author's arithmetic is angrier than yours and rounder than yours pamphlet numbers. I've told you how to hold them, but you're the one reading, and you're the one whose father carts sheaves to the mill with the crossed keys, and your voice does something strange in the middle of it that everyone in the room hears and no one remarks on. You finish. Tap of Madame's counters. Once. The fire thinking. Etienne not winding. Then the master quietly to the call in his hands. When I was your age, under my master, a préposé of the police of grain would ride out and open a hoarder's granary at sword point when a town went short. Clumsy, unjust, everyone cheated, and the bread came out. Now we are modern, now it's freedom, and the granary opens when the price says so. He sets down the needle. The gentleman under the cone calls that the natural order. The queue at the shutter is going to call it something else. And this spring we shall all hear what. He stands, banks the fire, and delivers the last line of the winter from the stairs, without turning. Cut your papers, Nicholas, and pray for rain in April, not for the wheat's decided, for the tempers. 12 sous by March, 13 in some parishes by Palm Sunday. The winter wheat comes up thin as an invalid. And now every thread of this story you've been holding all year, the crossed keys, the cues, Teresa's silences, Blaise's barrels, the pamphlet's arithmetic, the itch under the gleam. Every thread starts pulling toward 1 week of one spring, and I need you to lie still and easy while we walk into it, because you know by now how this channel works. You're going to be safe. You're going to be at the edge where watchers stand, but you're going to see it. They will call it afterward La Guerre des Farines, the Flour War. It starts on a market day, somewhere else, the way storms start on somebody else's horizon. On the 27th of April, 1775, at Beaumont-sur-Oise, a river town north of Paris, the women of the market look at the asking price of grain and refuse it. Not refuse to buy, refuse the price. They surround the sacks and they fix a price they call just the old price, the honest price, and they pay it. Coin counted into unwilling hands, and they carry the grain away, and the merchants stand there holding money they did not agree to. The age has a name for that too, an old name. Taxation populaire, the people's price setting. It is not looting, in the crowd's own furious understanding. It is enforcement of a law they believe is older than the king's newest minister. And then it moves. That's the thing the newspapers up the hill cannot at first believe, and the thing nobody in your bread queue finds surprising at all. It moves like fire in stubble, market to market, down the valleys, along the exact roads you saw from the dome of Saint-Louis, Méru, Pontoise. The last days of April eat the map, boats on the Oise boarded, mills visited by crowds, granaries opened by their own frightened owners. Then it crosses toward you, Saint-Germain, Poissy, where the cattle market is. The couriers come through Versailles faster and dustier each day, and the shop's clients under the cone have stopped calling the cold bracing. Their voices have gone bright and quick, and their scalps sweat under your master's fingers, and powder clings to sweat, and you know their fear the way a farrier knows a horse's, through the body, professionally. On the 1st of May, the corn market of Versailles is nearly empty of grain. The country dealers who should be rolling in have heard what's rolling with them and stayed home. An empty market in a hungry town is not a calm, it's a held breath. And on the 2nd of May, 1775, the flower war comes to the King's Own town, up the King's Own avenue, to the gates of the King's Own house, and you see it. And here is exactly how. The morning is grey and close, and the shop opens because shops open. That is the discipline of the age, shutters up while the world ends. You're at the counter weighing yesterday's sweepings, ink, book, ritual, when the sound arrives. Not shouting, not yet, nothing so shaped. A hum from the north of town, from the direction of the Marché Notre Dame, like a hive turned over 3 streets away. And under it, a note you know from home, from fair days gone wrong. The sound a crowd makes when it stops being shoppers. The master hears it too. He goes still with a curl half pinned. And then he does the thing you'll respect all your life. He finishes pinning the curl. Etienne, shutters, Nicola, upstairs, watch and tell me. Nobody through that door. From the attic dormer, kneeling on your own bed, you can see down the length of the street to where it opens toward the market quarter, and the market quarter is moving. People, hundreds, then visibly more, men in carters' smocks and women with their aprons doubled into carrying sacks and boys your age and younger, pouring around the corner the way water takes a new channel, and they are white. That's the detail your eye refuses first and keeps forever. Dusted, smeared, ghosted white, hands, sleeves, faces, because they have been at the flour, at the market and the mills and a granary near the Récollet, sacks slit and shared and shouldered, and the morning air behind them, down the whole street, hangs with a pale drifting haze you know better than anyone in France. Flour, hanging in a sunbeam, taking its time to settle. The town of Versailles, powdered. You kneel there with your heart going like a tressing bobbin, and you watch the age turn itself exactly inside out under your window. The poor of the plain wearing the white for one morning, and wearing it as bread, not frost. A woman passes directly below with her apron heavy against her body, cradled like a child leaving white handprints on her own doorpost. 2 men roll a whole barrel laughing with rage. If you've never heard that laugh, count yourself lucky. And then comes the cart. Stopped. Swarmed. Rocking on its axles while sacks go over its sides hand to hand to hand. And on the sacking, as one goes by beneath you, red and stencilled and upside down, you see them. 2 crossed keys, the Miltou villages from Gallardon, your father's mill, wheat from your own plain, milled by men whose sons you played with, carted here to be sold dear or sifted onto gentlemen, and now going over a cart's side into the aprons of people who mean to eat it. Both ends of your life, meeting in the middle of your street, at last, over a slit sack. You told me once. Forgive me, I'm ahead of myself. The umposite speaks through me sometimes. It felt like watching your own chest opened. The keys ride away on a stranger's shoulder, and you never learn one thing more about that sack, and it doesn't matter. You were the one person at that window who knew what the mark meant, and now you're the one lending me the eyes, so the mark goes on meaning it forever. What happens at the chateau itself that day? You get in pieces, then and after, and I'll give it to you the honest way, sorted, documented. The crowd, thousands, by the sober counts, reaches the palace gates themselves. the ones that hurt your eyes in the sun, and fills the great forecourt approaches, crying for bread at the price of 2 sous the pound. Documented. The king is at home. He is 20 years old, 10 months from his grandfather's deathbed. And beyond the gate stands more of his own people than he's ever seen in one place. White to the elbows with his kingdom's flower. Documented. There is no massacre. The guards hold the gates, and the crowd's war is with the price, not the person. They cry, "Long live the king," in the same breath as the 2 sous, and mean both. And documented, the astonishing thing, the price breaks. Promises come out from authority, cried through the town to still the storm, bread at 2 sous. The crowd, having obtained the old justice, does what the old justice does. It goes home to eat. Beyond that, who exactly promised on whose authority? Whether the young king watched from his windows, and what moved in him if he did. The accounts pull each ways, and I promised you I'd always say so. The state, for its part, honoured the promise the way states do. Within days, Turgot's ministry disavowed it. The price went back up, and the troops came. But that's within days. Stay in this one. Because in the middle of it, and this is the scene I chose this whole night for, so take it slowly, the shops boy is summoned up the hill. Midday, riot not 2 hours cold, flower still on the wind, and a runner from the Chevalier de Sérigny. Monsieur is required at the palace this evening. Monsieur's hair is a disgrace. The appointment stands. The master looks at the note, and at the bolted door, and at you, and the 2 of you go. Side streets, boxes held tight. Past a granary door hanging skewed on its hinge, with a white tide mark fanned across the cobbles. Past soldiers already doubling toward the market square with their drums quiet. And in that garret chamber under the roofs of Versailles, at 4 in the afternoon on the 2nd of May, 1775, while the town below still breathes flower and the couriers gallop for Paris, you hold the paper cone over the face of a kneeling still linen-shrouded gentleman, and pump the bellows, and powder him white with the same wheat, while beyond the window the last of the crowd's noise comes and goes on the wind like weather. Nobody speaks for the whole first layer. Then the chevalier from under the cone muffled conversational. One could smell them from the terrace, Delatour. Before one heard them, one could smell them. A pause. The little ivory hand comes up from the table, slides beneath the wig's edge, the old itch, on today of all days, and scratches and withdraws. Hunger it carries apparently. The bellows are in your hands. You're 18, and your mother has had the fever, and the ears came in light, and the keys went by on a stranger's shoulder this morning. You pump, steady even, circling as the master's wrist directs. The powder falls like the gentlest thing in the world. You say nothing, because you are furniture, and furniture is what you must remain for 4 more years, and the cone is over his face so he cannot even see what your face does, and you will be grateful for that small mercy as long as you live. There, monsieur, the master says at last, lifting the cone away, snow white, as always, as you walk home at dusk through a town gone quiet as a held slap. Troops at the corners now, the market square empty and trampled and pale as if it had snowed in May and the snow had failed. At the wash-house corner you pass Therese, out in the doorway light with her cousin, and her brother is with them. Home, safe, unmarked, and not meeting anyone's eye in a way that tells you exactly where his morning went, and that his sister's aprons are not empty tonight, and you look away first, deliberately, the one gift in your power to give. Whether he was in the crowd, no record will ever say. He was a composite's neighbour. History closed over him like water, along with almost everyone else in the street that day, and the aprons were heavy, and the children ate. At the shop door the master pauses with the key in the lock, and looks back down the darkening street toward the market. A long moment, 54 years of it. "Now you've seen it," he says. "The one morning in 100 years when the flower tells the truth." The key turns. Sweep up, weigh the bag, bank the fire. It'll all be lies again by Friday. He's right, of course. He's nearly always right. It's the most tiring thing about him. The next day, the 3rd of May, it's Paris. The bakeries of the capital stripped shutter to shutter, while the authorities stand curiously still, and for a day and a night the greatest city in Europe balances on the market women's scales. And then the counterstroke, because Turgot, whatever else history will say of him, does not bend twice, troops out along the grain roads by the tens of regiments, the maréchaussée sweeping the villages, arrests by the hundred through the valleys you watch the fire cross. The 2 sous are revoked as if never cried. The price stands where the market set it, bayonets holding the arithmetic steady, and the kingdom is invited firmly to consider the lesson learned. And on the 11th of May, 1775, in the place.The in Paris, where the city does its public dying, 2 men are hanged for the riots. 2 out of the thousands who slit and carried and cried the old price, chosen fast, tried fast, hanged high on a gallows built taller than custom, they said, so the lesson would carry over the crowd. And here is the detail that ran through every workshop of your trade within the week, the detail I give you exactly as the trade gave it, because the trade told it of itself, and the records bear the substance of it. One of the 2 was a wigmaker's boy, a garçon perruquier, 28 years old, a journeyman of your own craft, hands that had held the cone and pumped the bellows and woven the weft, same as yours, ended in the grève for what a hungry Tuesday put in them. That week the news went from bench to bench, town to town, quiet as sweepings, and every master in France found some reason to be gentler than usual with his boys, or harder, depending on the master, and yours took down the linen bag that evening, weighed it himself, wrote the weight himself, and said only, "Not to anyone, 28, and banked the fire. You do not sleep well that week. I'd think less of you if you had. But here is the thing about towns and trades and boys of 18, the thing that is either the shame of our species or its entire genius, and at a distance of 250 years I honestly cannot tell you which. It resumes. The market fills again, warily, the soldiers pricing the piece with their boots. The wash comes back on its proper mornings, and some weeks after, on no particular day, Thérèse looks at the state of your smock, and the old contempt kindles in her eye like a lamp relit, and she says, "Did you fight the pig this time, or marry it?" And the covered bridge stands rebuilt plank by plank, joke by joke, because that is how her people and your people have always rebuilt. It's the only lumber the poor are never short of. The 4-pound loaf falls back through 11 sous as the summer promises better, never quite to 9, and the Q's rosary is recited a shade less grimly. The kingdom breathes. The gleam resumes in fact at full blaze, because the new reign has one great ceremony still owed, and on the 11th of June, 1775, 1 month to the day after the Grève, Louis XVI is crowned at Rheims, anointed with the ancient oil in the ancient cathedral, 5 hours of splendour at the far end of a spring that smelled of flour and rope. The court empties toward champagne for it and takes your whole trade along. Every wig the shop can finish travels, boxed and blocked, and for 2 frantic weeks the workshop lives at the pace of the morning rush, a year gone. You at the frame till midnight, Etienne's needle flying, the sifting box going tap, tap, tap over the same wheat as ever, nobody saying the obvious, everybody thinking it. The clients return in July glowing like reliquaries, and under the cone all that month you hear it told and retold. The trumpets, the oaths, the king weeping at the anointing, thousands packed at the doors weeping with him. Vive le roi meant, roared. The same 2 words the crowd cried at the gates in May, wanting bread with them. Same love, both times. That's what nobody under the cone says. The town that shouted for 2 sous shouted for the crown a month later, and meant both with its whole chest. And if you can hold those 2 shouts in one hand, you understand this kingdom better than most of its ministers, and you're beginning to be afraid for it in a way you couldn't have explained a year ago. Etienne's term ends that same July. 6 years done, papers earned, 40 leaves worked off in coronation over time, and the master, this is the revelation, and it arrives, like everything from Antoine de la Tour, dry as sand. The master offers him the journeyman's place, wages, bench, bed, and when Etienne, astonished, asks why, after everything, the master finishes wiping an iron and answers with the story you'd waited 2 years to hear. How a boy came out of the Beauvaisis in 1737 with wooden shoes and a hunger you could hear. How his own master caught that boy, in his 3rd year, selling combings out the back door for exactly the reason Etienne named at the dressing frame. No room at the top, no ladder but a stolen one. How that master weighed the bag, wrote the debt, told no one, and worked the thief for a decade until the thief could buy the license everyone swore he'd never touch. You've been watching me pay him back for 2 years, the master says, hanging up the iron. I'd have thought a clever boy would have noticed sooner. And he goes upstairs to his supper, leaving the whole shop absolutely silent, and Madame's counters clicking overhead like slow applause. Etienne stays till Michaelmas. Then Paris takes him after all. A proper place, hired fare, a shop near the Palais Royal where the future is being invented daily. And he leaves on an October morning with everything he owns in one pack, and pauses in the doorway he first came through at 14, and looks back at you, the frame, the blocks, the bag on its nail. Mind your weights, Beauceron. A grin, last of its line. It gets lighter, the bag, the rest of it. Somewhere around the 4th year it all gets lighter. And he's gone, and that same week a new boy arrives. Pierre, 13, from a village near Dreux, paid in by a father in a good coat with a cross for a signature, and so small the powder smock they cut down for him still laps his boots. His first morning he stands where you stood at the copper pot stirring wrong, terrified of the murmuring fat, terrified of the master, terrified of you, and you hear your own voice deliver without planning it the sentence you didn't know you'd been carrying to term. Watch and copy and don't argue. It's a good house. Nothing in this town is allowed to look like what it is, the house included. He doesn't understand. He will. You didn't either. And that, if you're keeping the count I'm keeping, is the year, all the way round. Fat to fat, sack to sack, one boy in at the copper pot and one boy out the door with papers, the wheel of the trade come full circle with you moved one place along it. 3rd year apprentice now, keeper of the bag, trusted at the irons on living heads, known by name to a fat renderer, a hair merchant, a laundress, and one chevalier who has finally, the age of miracles is not past, paid something. 200 livres on account in the flush of a good summer at the tables, leaving a mere 400 and some owing. And Madame Delatour entered it in her book, they say, with the smallest sound ever recorded of a purse unclosing. The evenings draw in. The new wheat, a fair harvest this year, fair enough, comes down the roads to the mills, and some of it comes back up the hill as bread, and some, sifted finer than any bread will ever be, comes to your shop in 50-pound sacks, and on about every third one, red and stencilled, the crossed keys, going right on meaning everything, saying nothing, the way marks do. And on the quiet October evenings when the shop is shuttered and the bag is weighed, and Pierre is asleep mid-sentence the way you used to be, you sit sometimes on the workshop step where Guillaume smoked his pipe, and you watch the light die over the roofs toward the palace, and you do what I brought you here a year ago to learn to do. You watch. The curls were only ever what we sold while we were watching, so let the year settle now, the way powder settles, taking its time in the last of the light. It's a November evening, 1775. The shop is closed, the shutters are home in their grooves, the day's jars are cooling in their row of little moons. The fire is banked to a red murmur, and the workshop holds its night smell, the one you'll carry in the seams of yourself forever. Lavender over lard, cold iron, old smoke, clean linen, a ghost of violets from the sifting box. Pierre is asleep in the bed you now command the better half of, breathing like a small determined bellows. Upstairs the tread and counter-click of the household going down for the night. Out in the dark, 3 streets off, the palace burns its 1,000 candles behind its 1,000 panes, gleaming away at nobody, keeping itself white out of pure habit, the way it will keep on doing long after everyone it's gleaming for tonight is gone. The year's last news came down the roads in October, in the curé's careful hand, and for once the margins held no warnings. The harvest on the plain came in fair, not rich. The letter is careful, the plain is always careful, but fair, sound, dree in the barns by Michaelmas. The rents are paid. Your mother is strong again, strong enough to be described as complaining about the strength of others, which in Aubrey language is a certificate of health. And Marguerite is to be married at Martimas, a wheelwright's son, steady from the next parish. And here the curé permits himself the one flourish of the whole correspondence. She will stand at the church door with her hair uncovered, as brides on the plain do, because it has grown back past her shoulders now, 4 years growing, and your mother has let it be known at every fair from here to Chartres that no buyer with scales and shears need trouble to look at it. Some things get bought back, not many in this story. Hold on to that one. And you had something to send to the wedding, which is the part you'll keep longest. At Michaelmas, with the bag's year of weights ruled off and totted in Madame's book, the master set a coin on the counter by way of accounts, 1 silver écu of 6 livres. Not wages. Wages would breach your contract, and he'd sooner breach a levy. But, in his words, the bag's tithe, for a year of honest ounces, 6 livres. You looked at it a long time. Then you kept back 3 sous of it, and the rest travelled home the only way money safely travels for people like you. In Guillaume's strong box, on his autumn circuit through the Chartres country, against his sworn word and his scales honour, to be counted into the curé's hand for Marguerite's wedding portion. Everything in this story walks up the hill, boy. Fat, wheat, hair, all of it, every morning of the world. Once, just once at the end of it, 1 coin walked down. Guillaume, when you thanked him, was scandalised. "Thank the bag," he said. "I'm just the road." The 3 sous you kept became a comb, a new boxwood comb from the same peddler's stall, wide-toothed, plain as bread. And your old one, the one that has ridden your belt since your first winter, went to Pierre, who received it with both hands and the expression of a boy being knighted, and wears it at his belt exactly as you wore it, which is to say constantly, visibly, like a rank. It cost 3 sous, the trade's smallest inheritance, and he's already been seen at the basin on Sundays, combing his own hair with it, gravely, a wigmaker grooming the one head in Versailles nobody will ever pay to whiten. You laughed for a week, quietly, and said nothing. Some ceremonies you don't disturb. The first snow came early, the last week of November, and it did the thing you'd been waiting a year and a half without knowing it to see it do. It powdered the town. All of it, evenly, gratis. The master's roof and the washhouse roof, Blaise's yard and the market square, the palace and the plain, one even coat of the honest white, the only frost in this whole kingdom that falls on every head at the same hour and asks nothing back. You stood in the shop door at first light with the broom idle in your hands and looked down the Rue de Sartory, white as a Sunday wig from end to end, and Thérèse came through it with her basket steaming and stopped, and followed your look, and got it at once, of course. She grew up next to your trade the way you grew up next to wheat. Very fine work, she said, considering the street with a connoisseur's squint. Even. Good coverage, better than yours. And went on with her linen, leaving her boot prints down the middle of the gleam, which is, when I think back across 2.5 centuries at everything I've shown you tonight, as neat a summary as the age ever got. The white came down equally for once, and the working feet went straight through it, because the wash still had to arrive. Blaise's dripping still arrives free, Easter having been quietly redefined as a moving feast that never quite comes. Madame's counters still click their slow arithmetic overhead. The Chevalier owes again, of course, climbing back toward his old form, but the shop carries him the way the town carries the palace, grumbling, faithfully, out of a habit older than sense, and because Madame, who forgets nothing, has his 200 livres locked in the strong box as proof that even glaciers move if you keep the books long enough. You did the last round an hour ago, swept the floor by candle stub, every clipping into the bag onto the balance, the weight into the book in your own steadying hand. 9 ounces and a quarter. Checked the pomatum, cellar cool, sweet, obedient till morning. Straightened the irons on their nails, smallest to largest, a peal of bells rung down for the night. Touched. You always touch it. You don't know why. Yes, you do. The blue-lidded crock on its high shelf, remixed, honest as it's ever going to be. Cut tomorrow's papilotes from a sermon nobody wanted. The small offices of an ordinary trade done in the right order, in a warm room in a quiet town, in a kingdom that has decided for now to hold. And this is where I'm supposed to tell you what became of everybody, and you know by now why I mostly can't. The master, Madame, Etienne and Guillaume, Blaise and Thérèse and the Chevalier and the boy at the window with the Bellows in his hands. I built them for you out of 100 workshop lives that left their traces in guild rolls and ledgers and angry pamphlets and inventories after death, and whatever separately became of each of those 100, history closed over them like water over the market square and kept the sacks and lost the names. The dates were true. The prices were true. The fat and the flour and the itch and the keys were true. The eyes were borrowed. That was always the deal. But you, the you lying still and heavy wherever you are 2.5 centuries downstream, You get to know the one thing the boy on the workshop step can never know, so hold it gently, the way you'd hold a finished curl. You do not yet know, Nicholas, that the white is almost over, that the powder, which looks as eternal tonight as the parish church, has hardly a dozen good years left before the world starts finding it absurd, that the whole shining system, the fat, the flour, the cone, the little ivory hands, will be swept off the heads of Europe within a generation, so completely that children born in your own street will laugh at portraits of their grandfathers, that the wheat will stay wheat and go back to being bread, and that the argument you read aloud by tallow light will be finished, in the end, not by pamphlets at all. The gleam had a while yet, that November evening. But the flower had told the truth once in the street in the spring, and the truth once out is very patient. The palace is still there. You can go and stand in it. People do, 7-8 million of them a year now, shuffling through the hall of mirrors in comfortable shoes, past all that multiplied light, and not one head in the crowd is powdered, and almost none of them, drifting past the gilded doors toward the gardens, ever thinks to ask what the shine used to cost, or who carried it up the hill on their shoulders before dawn, which is, when you think about it, the wigmakers' oldest rule, holding faithfully 2 centuries past its trade. The gleam still doesn't tell where it came from, but you know now. You stood in the workshop. You'll never see a white wig in a portrait again without smelling the lard under the lavender, and honestly, that was the whole idea. And the rest of it never really ended, did it? We still buy the story in the jar. The bear's grease just wears different labels now, promising thickness, promising youth. 9 parts ordinary and 1 part tail, and we still pay for the tail. We still sell our hair when the money runs short. It still travels from poor heads to richer ones. The sheet at the fair just got quieter. We still whiten and smooth and frost ourselves into whoever the room requires, and keep an ivory hand's length between the itch and the audience. And somewhere tonight, as surely as bells, somebody is standing in a queue doing arithmetic about bread while somebody else, 3 streets uphill, wears the same grain as a decoration. Some things don't change. The wheat doesn't change. Only the heads it lands on. But that's the world's account, and the world can keep it open without you till morning. Madame will tally it. She always does. You're back on the step, in the November dark, 18 years old, and the cold is coming up off the stone through your breeches, and it's time to go in. Tomorrow there will be fat to render, first thing, and the fire to wake before it. Tomorrow there will be the sifting box, tap, 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 and Pierre to teach. Badly, patiently, the way you were taught. Tomorrow there will be heads to whiten, and a bag to weigh, and a book to keep. The same as this morning, the same as tomorrow's tomorrow, the same as all the mornings stretching out ahead of you in a row like blocks on a shelf. But that's tomorrow. Nothing can be rendered, whitened, weighed, or saved tonight. Tonight the trade is done, and the town is quiet, and the only task left in the whole sleeping kingdom is yours, and it's this. Put it all down. So climb the stairs, one hand on the cold rail. Ease in beside Pierre, who mutters some village word and burrows down. Pull the blanket to your chin. The whole blanket. Seniority has its wages. Feel the day go out of your shoulders, out of your wrists, out of your cracked and shining hands, the way heat goes out of a banked fire. Slowly, evenly, nothing wasted. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a bed and a blanket and a trade in your fingers, and that's more than the plane could promise you, and that's enough. You are 3 streets from the brightest palace on earth, and the dark in this attic is yours alone, and that's enough. 1,000 mornings are behind you, and the 1,001st will keep till the bells. It always keeps. That's the secret nobody tells apprentices. The work keeps. Only the sleep is lost if you lose it. Listen. The town is going down around you layer by layer the way powder settles. The last cart on the paving somewhere by the market. A dog with one opinion left giving it up. The watch calling something unhurried twice further off the second time. Wind over the roof tiles, thin and clean, all the way in from the plain, from the stubble and the fallow and the dark stone mill with its sails tied still, over all those sleeping fields, over your father's house, up the long shallow rise it's been climbing this whole story, to slip under one attic tile and touch your face like a coif. Every thread of the web is still tonight. Even the spider sleeps, so let it come now. Let sleep take you the way the powder took the light in the morning window, a soft white drift settling without weight, covering everything evenly, making everything quiet, making everything the same. Let the fire murmur. Let the blocks keep their watch on the shelf, wooden heads dreaming wooden dreams, every curl pinned and papered till morning. Let the ledger lie shut on its debts, and the balance hang level over nothing, and the blue-lidded crock keep its secret, and the ivory hand lie folded on its table up the hill, 5 little fingers curled at rest, nothing left to scratch for, nothing left to hide. Let the bells be hours away, let the fat be tomorrow's. Let your hands, your good, greased, flour-dusted, iron-scarred hands, fall open at last on the blanket, holding nothing, owing nothing, weighing nothing at all. The plain is asleep, and the palace is asleep, and the wheat between them is asleep in the dark ground. Not yet bread, not yet powder, not yet anybody's argument. Just seed, waiting, easy, the way you're waiting now, easy, on the near edge of sleep. You've earned this rest. 2.5 centuries later, at the end of this long white story, so have you. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.